thinking about the news. Daddy leaves it on all day through. I've been thinking about the wars, and to be honest, I can't take it anymore. I hear you every day, the awful words you say, but hate can't be the face of the American dream. I've been thinking about my life, how one day I want to be a mother and a wife. I've been scared of that thought too. In a world of struggle, what are we gonna do? I hear you every day, saying it's gonna be okay, but hate can't be the face of the American dream. And I know we've got a long way to go, but I've got to believe that change is a choice, and it can start with me. And I've been thinking about our mother and how they took her away from her people, put her in a boarding school, away from her brother, sister, and culture. I hear her every night, saying we've gotta make this right, 'cause hate can't be the face of the American dream. And I know we've got a long way to go, but I've got to believe that change is a choice, and it can start with me. Change is a choice, and it can start with me. And change is a choice, and it can start with you.
Welcome to worship at Wildflower Church this Independence Day. My name is Sarah Schiefer-Veal, and I use she, her, and or they, them pronouns. This service was originally billed as Democracy in America, Past, Present, Future, and how Unitarian Universalists can help us get there. As the service creation process unfolded, several members of our beloved community exercised their fifth principle right of conscience to communicate to the worship team that that service, as planned, could not live up to our common anti-racist values. I celebrate the love and courage they showed and the work they did to spotlight speech acts that harm them and that would make hypocrites of us when presented in our worship service. The worship team asks for your patience as we meet to sort through communications and convene the team to begin internal work. If you have any concerns about what may have happened or what you hear, please address them to us at worship@wildflowerchurch.org or with anyone who offers to make themselves available to you, freely offers to discuss this. So the service we have for you today is a little bit different than advertised. Bear with us if our transitions are a little shaky. I'll be your co-lay worship leader along with Serena Harrington. We'll have contributions from Sky Howell, Dee Adams, and Adam Hagemeyer. Sky Howell will lead us in honoring Native children and share our land acknowledgement.
May we get the screen shared? Uju, Indestanakas, Sky Howell, Potawatomi, Ottawa, and Dow. My name is Sky Howell of the Potawatomi and Ottawa Tribal Nations. It is an honor to be here in community with you all today, and it is a further honor to be surrounded in solidarity by a community that is leaning into and living into its values. I invite you to notice what it is that is supporting your body in this moment. And I invite you to close your eyes if that feels comfortable to you. Fix your gaze or find a place to rest your eyes. Today, in particular, we hold in our hearts all of the families in our Native community who are mourning the loss of over 1,000 children's remains that have been discovered in the past few weeks in unmarked graves in boarding schools. So far, 7 schools have been searched, and the bodies of 1,505 children have been found. Between Canada and the US, there are still 497 schools to go. I invite you to take a deep collective breath in. As you release it, I invite you to honor the feelings that may be emerging in your soul. When they buried the children, what they did not know, they were lovingly embraced by the land. Held and cradled in a mother's heart, the trees wept for them, the wind. They sang morning songs their mothers didn't know to sing. Bending branches to touch the earth around them, the Creator cried for them, the tears falling like rain. Mother Earth held them until they could be found. Now our voices sing the morning songs with the trees, the wind, the light, and light sacred fires. Ensure they are never forgotten as we sing justice. Abigail Echohot. I invite you to take another deep breath in. And as you exhale, come back together in community as we go to honor the original stewards of this land and region. We honor the original stewards of this land and region as a way of honoring all those who came before us and a necessary first step in sharing the truth of our shared history. If you'd like to learn more about our Native community, I invite you to connect with Great Promise for American Indians. Let us take a moment to honor the original stewards of this land and region, the Carrizo, the Comanche, the Comacrudo, the Lapan and Mescalero Apaches, the Karankawa, the Tonkawa, the Neches, the Eastern Pueblo, and one of the oldest known tribes to this region, the Coatecan, the federally recognized tribes, including the Alabama Coshada tribe of Texas, the Kickapoo traditional tribe of Texas, and the Isleta del Sur Pueblo. We honor the state recognized tribes, including the Lapan Apache tribe and the Texas Band of Yaqui Indians. We honor all those who have been detribalized, those who were formerly enslaved, all those who have been colonized, all those who were murdered and have gone missing still yet today, and those who continue to be persecuted on our man-made borders. We honor the many families in our community who have been forced to relocate due to gentrification, and we honor all those who continue to face oppression based on the color of their skin, their nationality, gender, sexual orientation, age, ability level, religion, and any other perceived difference. In particular, all those who continue to face anti-Blackness daily because the color of their skin has been weaponized. We know that Black lives matter, and we understand that all lives cannot matter until Black lives matter. We further acknowledge the privilege of using digital technologies not readily available and accessible to many Indigenous, Black, and Brown communities. This land acknowledgement is a critical first step in acknowledging the truth of our shared history, and I invite you to consider how you might move beyond a land acknowledgement to best serve our Native community. Miigwech.
Well, good morning. My name is Adam Hegemeyer. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the president of the Wildflower Board of Trustees. And for Community Matters today, where we try to live into our mission, growing spiritually together, spreading love, justice, and joy. Next Sunday, July 11th, after the service starting at 1:30, the Anti-Racist White Affinity Group will be meeting to explore what it means to live the fourth line of our covenant. We care for one another and for ourselves. If you're interested and you haven't attended one before, and if you have, you'll need to register. And I'll share the link in the chat right now. There we go for that. Some quick notes. The Wildflower Reopening Task Force is continuing apace. One thing we did was last Saturday, we showed up to the sanctuary to poke at all the buttons on the soundboard, look at cameras, see how we would need to have a hybrid environment where we would have services in the sanctuary and as well as still view them from home. There's a lot of reading manuals, getting on ladders, convincing people to hold a camera up real high as they could to see what it looked like. So yeah, it's happening, it's going. I just want to make sure you all are aware of it. And also, the end of June and beginning of July marked a transition. It's the formal moment in our bylaws when who is on the board changes. So with that, it happened on July 1st until June 30th. I want to thank and acknowledge Dee Adams, Michelle Venegas Matula, Susie Epstein, and Melita Noel for their time on the board. And welcome, Laura Chris Green, Larry Thompson, is it Lynn? I wrote that down. Lynn Whittington? Did I hear that right? Yes. And Sarah Sheffer-Rial as they officially begin their time on the board July 1st. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email the board at board@wildflowerchurch.org. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Serena Harrington. My pronouns are she and her. In Unitarian Universalist churches, we light a chalice when we come together to worship. Please join me, if you choose, in lighting your own chalice at home. You can also make the chalice hand sign. Now join me in saying the chalice lighting words that will appear on your screen. Our chalice lighting words this morning come from Gregory David Miller. This fire is a reminder of the light within us all, the yearning for freedom, the longing for truth, the flame of intuition, the torch of conscience. We dedicate this service to the remembrance of this holy light. Please join us for our first hymn, hymn 194, Faith is a Forest. The tune may be unfamiliar, so enjoy the music and lyrics if you choose not to sing. Michael, if you could go ahead and put our first hymn up for us.
Faith is a forest in which doves play at night. Insight can hear the still small voice deep inside. Web of life may this thread I weave. Strength and commitment to all I believe. Vision be my guide as I seek my way. Lead me into this tender day. Speak through me in all I do and say. Seeds of both meek and strong are scattered in air. Dignity shines undimmed by bigotry's glare. Web of life, may this thread I weave. Help me bear witness to all I believe. Justice be my guide as I seek my way. Lead me into this tender day. Speak through me in all I do and say. Fortune and famine ride the swift winds of chance. Sorrow and pleasure seem united in dance. Web of life, may this thread I weave. Mingle compassion with all I believe. Mercy be my guide as I seek my way. Lead me into this tender day. Speak through me in all I do and say.
For our responsive reading this morning by Andrea Mole, entitled All That We Share is Sacred, I will read the regular text, and I invite you to respond by reading the italicized text along with Sarah. Michael, go ahead and put up the slide for us. As we gather together, may we remember, when you share with me what is most important to you,
That is where listening begins.
when I show you that I hear you, when I say your life matters,
That is where compassion begins.
when I open the door to greet you,
That is where hospitality begins.
when I venture out to bring you to shelter,
That is where love begins.
when I risk my comfort to ease your suffering, when I act against hatred, violence, and injustice,
That is where courage begins.
when we experience the full presence of each other because of our shared humanity, because of our differences,
That is where holy gratitude begins.
may this space be a table that is not complete until all are welcome.
May this table be a space of beauty, where together we create a series of miracles, and where all that we share is sacred.
May it be so.
The time for all ages this week comes from our CYRE director, Piaf Azul. Michael, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Piaf, My pronouns are she and her. And for today's Time for All Ages, we're going to be hearing a story about someone named Sophia who makes a change in her community. I think you all remember that one of our UU principles is that everyone deserves a vote or a voice in the things that concern them. And in this story, you'll see it's not the kind of voting where we go to decide who a president will be or we vote yes or no for some big decision. In this case, it's something that we choose to do because sometimes what we do or choose not to do can also be a kind of vote. Like if a company is not treating its workers fairly, or maybe they're not treating the planet fairly, then sometimes people choose not to put their money on that company, and that can also be a vote in a way. And in this story, you'll get to see how Sophia gets her whole community involved in voting or acting to make the community better.
Hi, Future Titans! Today's book is Sophia Valdez, Future Prez, written by Andrea Beatty and illustrated by David Roberts. Sophia was a baby who got things done, helping her family before she turned 1. She and Abuelo went out every week to help elderly friends around Blue River Creek who couldn't get out and about on their own and with no place to gather were stuck home alone. Raking the leaves, taking pets for a walk, or just dropping by for a treat and a talk, Sophia Valdez did as much as she could for her family and friends and her whole neighborhood. A dreamer, a doer, a real-life go-getter. Most people liked good, but Sophia liked better. Each morning, Abuelo walked Sophie to class. They walked home again along Blue River Pass, making plans, munching cookies, Abuelo and girl. Except for that Tuesday when Pup saw the squirrel. With a howl, Pup took off, racing all through the town, over, under, beneath, and around. Sophia scrambled to try to keep up with the hollering man and the bellowing pup. Up the squirrel ran to the top of a hill made of leftover junk for the local landfill. They reached the tip-top of that mountain of trash, which jiggled and broke with an ear-splitting crash. Down they all tumbled and hit with a thud on a moldy old pumpkin surrounded by mud. Ouch, cried Abuelo. He struggled to stand. A dangerous mess, he said, grasping her hand. Next day, Sophia walked to school solo, but it wasn't the same without her Abuelo. This is not right, declared young Sophia, who glared at Mount Trashmore and got an idea. Very next morning at 1:30 dawn, she planted a sign at the front of the lawn. She stood back and smiled, and Pup gave a bark. Get rid of Mount Trashmore. Let's build a new park. Each of her neighbors had something to say about benches and fountains and places to play. Meeting spots, gardens, a basket for bees, a rubber duck pond, and a kiosk for cheese. She drew every thought on her map of the park, which was perfectly perfect by 1:45. She drifted to sleep in her soft, cozy bed. Then, bam! She woke up when a thought smacked her head. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized each one of her neighbors had said, "Let me know when it's done." They all thought Sophia could build it alone, but how could one girl do so much on her own? The weight of that thought made her tender heart ache as night thunder growled and she lay wide awake. Then dawn brought a storm and the gloomy sky wept, and the heartsick Sophia finally slept. Abuelo baked cookies when Sophie got up. He gave her a bagful and sneaked one to Pup. He blinked back a tear as he hugged his Sophia. For courage, he whispered. Te amo, mi vida. Sophia's knees wobbled. She felt weak inside. She looked at his ankle and quite nearly cried. Though she didn't feel brave or courageous at all, Sophia Valdez went to face City Hall. The mayor's office sent her to room 401, the Blue River Creek Department of Fun, which sent her downstairs to room 302, the office of duck ponds and cool things to do, to the office of monkeys, Department of Cheese, division of fountains and meetings and bees, then down to the basement so musty and cramped where all the town's papers were sorted and stamped. And that's where the clerk said what no one else did. You can't build a new park. You're only a kid. The word smacked Sophia deep down in her heart. Her plan was kiboshed before it could start. I think, said Sophia, I think that law's wrong. But her second-grade voice didn't sound very strong. The clerk said, clearly it cannot be done. Do you have any questions? Sophia said, one. If you were me and I was you and he was your grandpa, what would you do? Well, said the clerk. Then she said nothing at all. She thought and she thought, then she sent out a call to every employee throughout City Hall. The entire government of Blue River Creek crammed into the office to hear Sophie speak, but her words jumbled up and her cheeks turned bright red as a dozen emotions rushed into her head. Her heart beat so loudly she thought it would crack. The crowd leaned in closer, and Sophie leaned back. Then her arm brushed the edge of the old cookie stack. And that was the moment when Sophia first knew being brave means doing the thing you must do, though your heart cracks with fear, though you're just in grade 2. She took a deep breath, looked the mayor in the eye, and though her knees wobbled, she held her head high. Sophia started talking. She spelled out her plan, and why it all mattered, and how it began. And once she got rolling, she had lots to say about meeting spots, monkeys, and places to play, and other ideas for things they could do to help the town elders and other folks too. She had thoughts on the library, thoughts on the zoo, and perhaps a way to combine the two. And... All right, cried the mayor, go start a petition. If the town wants a new park, we'll form a commission. And so young Sophia got right to work, with some help from her family and pup and the clerk. And others joined in, not all, but a few, like Miss Lilla Greer and the kids in grade 2. There were hearings and surveys and taxes to figure, then bulldozers, cranes, and a blue bigger digger. They all built that park. That's how it got done, with the hard work of, by, and for everyone. But it began with the dream of one person, just one, who laced up her shoes and then led the way to help Blue River Creek get a new place to play. Now every evening till long after dark, the town comes together at Citizens Park. They all hold this truth to be self-evident, that Sophia Valdez could grow up to be president. Until then, Sophia, that real-life go-getter, helps Blue River Creek get better and better.
We celebrate this wildflower community in many ways, as our hearts and spirits are lifted through our web of connection. Our offering is one of the many ways we live into our mission. If you're a new visitor, please know that the gift of your presence today is your offering.
There's gotta be some hope. There's gotta be some hope. There's gotta be some way for you to send your dogs away and to leave the land alone. It's gotta be a crime somewhere in your heart you'll find. We're fighting for our right to keep the future bright and protect the ones we love. Our sisters and our brothers, we are camping out for each other. We are strong. and we're standing up for the water. Don't poison the future away. You've gotta have a soul. Mother Earth protects us all. If you treat her with disrespect, then what message have you left for your children and their home? In the river is our sisters and our brothers. We are camping out for each other. We are stronger when we band together, and we're standing up for the water. Don't poison the future away. How can you take and not appreciate the soil? Don't let this black snake contaminate our drinking water. This is for our sons and daughters. In the river is our sisters and our brothers. We are camping out for each other. We are stronger when we band together, and we're standing up for the water. Don't poison the future away.
A few weeks ago, I heard an interview on NPR with a woman, and I'm sorry I could not find her name again, but she illustrated the idea of democracy in a way that really stood out to me. She explained how democracy is not really a stationary thing. It's not, do you have democracy or not? It's more that it's always in flux, and the best way to evaluate and describe your current state as a society is to observe if you're heading in the direction to empower and give voice to more people or fewer people. She affirmed from her view that we are currently headed in the direction of fewer. When I volunteered for lay leader role this week, I was honestly hoping I could just read a professional's work on the topic. This topic of democracy feels so big and out of reach and beyond anything I can really control or influence. The current state of democracy feels tenuous and scary. I have a fear that publicizing my negativity could weigh on those who hear me. But I'm leaning into the hope that if anyone else feels similar, you'll know you're not alone. I think I have a constant feeling of how much can I actually do to change things and make things better. But I equally worry about how much worse can it get. For me, it's a daily struggle for hope and to balance the focus on action with also taking care of family and myself. Right now in the United States, I think we've all seen the pull and deterioration away from democracy more intimately. And the pull has been more aggressive than many of us have felt in a lifetime. Where were you when you first heard about the insurrection at the Capitol? I think that day will be one that stands out in my memory as vividly as 9/11. I know exactly where I was and what I was doing. For 9/11, I was in college, in my professor's office talking about my project. For the insurrection, I was taking a walking break from working at home, and I got a text from my friend. People, American citizens, threatened violence on our democratically elected officials to prevent the process of seating our democratically elected president. Outspoken representatives did and continue to criticize the legitimacy of the election. And now so many states are adopting voting laws to silence the voices that they do not want to hear. We are in a period where there are big swings against democracy and the pulse is frantic. Each day seems to bring more bad news. On Thursday, the Supreme Court sided with Arizona's restrictive voting laws, making it even more difficult for future challenges from other states to be rectified. All of the voting laws that are being written or passed right now to limit how and when, and thus who, can vote stress me out and make me want to scream. Not just because they are happening, but that we're relying on a tedious and broken system to keep it in check. We're praying that the state representatives can prevent more of these laws from being put into place. Or we're relying on federal representatives to write and pass new ones that override the state ones. Or we're relying on the judicial system to keep unconstitutional laws out and uphold the constitutional ones. It's hard to keep faith for any one of those routes right now. I think the most overwhelming and heartbreaking aspect of our wavering democracy is that about half of our population sees the election results differently. One half of the country is worried that our democracy is at risk, but actually the other half already thinks that democracy is gone. I mean, if you're convinced that the wrong person is sleeping in the White House, wouldn't you epitomize that as a failing of democracy? Which side you fall on depends on where you get information and who you trust. With how prone much of this country is to argue with guns and violence versus talking and listening, I worry how we can get to a better place without more violence. I often think about how the Civil War never really ended, it just went into hibernation. And similar to the brood X cicadas on the East Coast, it's just emerging in full view again. Inherent in my belief of democracy is the understanding that the majority vote wins. I'm scared that so many Americans support a person and that most of a party that wants to silence opposition and most of a party wants to silence opposition and minority votes. What if that faction becomes or really is more than 50%? If I support democracy, then they win. Even if we fix a broken voting system, they'd still win. I'm not an expert on how the government operates or how to best redirect our country to a better democracy. But like any professional athlete will attest, you have to visualize success if you have any hope of achieving it. So in preparing for this reflection, I've started to visualize what a better democracy looks like to me. In no particular order. First, we got to fix our overt flaws with representation. Over 4 million Americans don't have anyone in Congress to vote for them. DC and the territories of Puerto Rico, Guam, the US Virgin Islands, American Samoa, and the Northern Mariana Islands don't have equal representation as I do. What they can and cannot vote for, or what representation they do or do not have, is confusing and arbitrary. Second, make gerrymandering illegal. Have independent oversight. We cannot continue to have the fox watching the chicken coop. No one ever made laws willingly that would hurt their outlook. If you haven't seen the map of Austin, it's a joke. We are cracked into 4 ridiculous looking districts to dilute the Democratic vote. Instead of 3 or 4 Democratic representatives in Congress, we have 1. Third, fix the Electoral College. The structure is absurd. We have the means to make it equal, or at least more equal. There are various suggestions out there on how to make it better. And the only thing really holding us back is fear. Fourth, make it easy for everyone to vote safely and securely. It's pretty straightforward in principle, but there's a multitude of opinions and approaches embedded in that. Lastly, I know the path forward will take vision, organization, and effort. Our 5th UU principle outlines our common value for the democratic process. As I began writing this, I was so pleased and encouraged to see the announcement sent out from the GA delegates concerning the action of immediate witness to stop voter suppression and partner for voting rights and a multiracial democracy. The action calls upon the UUA and congregations like us to engage with UU actors on the topic, like UU the Vote or UU of Social Justice, to take action to advocate for current legislation. And last, encourage collaboration with the UU state action networks and local partners to combat voter suppression. Democracy is an evolution. So as we reflect on the occasion of July 4th today, at a minimum, I think we can embrace the fact that democracy is something you have to fight for, to work for. History shows those in power are not going to willingly relinquish that power. We have to nurture it, to grow it in the direction that is further democracy, not less. We have to want it, not be complacent, and not give up on it.
Thank you, Serena. Each Sunday, we share joys and concerns as a community. What have you been experiencing this last week that you would like to share with us and have it be helped by those present today? We invite you to share your joys and concerns in the chat box. Michael, if you'll put up the slide.
This community will hold all of your joys and concerns with love. Let's pause and breathe in that love and breathe out compassion.
So, what does Unitarian Universalism have to say about democracy? The fifth principle talks about democracy, but not as an end in itself. It calls us to affirm and promote the right of conscience and the use of democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. It's the right of conscience and the democratic process. Democracy is a means to an end, a means that magnifies and follows up on the call of someone's conscience. Someone like Sofia Valdez in our Time for All Ages today. Where does that conscience take us? Well, if we're UUs, and some of us are, the idea is that it takes us towards the sixth principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. In Sophia's story, as in so much of life, her exercise of conscience doesn't begin in freedom, at least not in an unconstricted space of infinite possibility. Her life and our lives are shaped and constrained by the people we share them with, both those we choose to love and those we don't. Blue River Park had serious problems with the number one basic function of living with others: waste management. There is a literal mountain of garbage abutting a pedestrian area. She mustered her courage to work with others to build a park in Blue River Creek after her dog chased a squirrel and pulled her and her grandfather up over the top of that garbage heap. If we think of freedom narrowly as a state of absolute unfetteredness, the only free character in that scenario is the squirrel, and he's being chased by Pup. But if we expand our ideas of freedom to make space for sharing the world with others, everyone in the story becomes more free when they start listening to Sophia and working together to build their park. They have something to vote on in their democratic process, something that they are free to say yes to because it is designed for them. They have a park to hang out in and do stuff in instead of a pile of garbage to avoid. This isn't a cool story because Sophia lives in a democracy. It's a cool story because Sophia managed to get people to build a park where there was trash. She saw clearly what needed to be done and did it. Democracy is a means to that end. And in a healthy democracy, a much broader set of Sophias has the power to make parks happen than in any other system of governance. But the power of democracy depends on conscience, which in turn depends on access to truth and meaning. Our relationship with democracy in this country has always been troubled by the disingenuous occasion of its rollout. In the words of historian John Hope Franklin, the signers of the Declaration of Independence gave lip service to their ideals of liberty, but human bondage and human dignity were not as important to them as their own political and economic independence. Professor Franklin wrote these words in the 1970s and spoke with the authority and viewpoint of a 20th century BIPOC American history scholar. But his criticism of their hypocrisy wasn't new. Samuel Johnson, who wrote the dictionary, pointed out something similar at the time. All of us live with the fallout of the founders' weak consciences and moral cowardice every day. It is in the design of our legislature, the shapes of our states, our poor track record with long-term legal planning, and the ethnic makeup of the body count from 1776 to today. Just cap it at the Declaration of Independence. Democracy is taking the heat and feeling the stress of problems far above its pay grade. When decision-making is not rooted in conscience or directed towards a goal of moral righteousness, it being inside a democratic framework is only valuable because people of character have some hope of turning things over in the next cycle. So what is there for us then, saddled with a track record of despair inside a framework of hope? The fifth principle's unequivocal answer is the right of conscience, strong conscience, moral bravery. If our cultural ancestors' moral cowardice brings us despair, then as a community committed to spreading joy, our answer for ourselves and our descendants must be a legacy of bravery. So over the next weeks and months, I invite each of you to reflect and deeply consider your position in the interdependent web of all existence. As a UU, an individual of conscience, and a person of your particular age, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, ability, temperament, and conscience. What space is available to you, to show up and do things bravely, without fear, in the service of your fellow wildflowers and humans? Just as none of us look the same, bravery doesn't look the same on us. Some of us can say brave words and ask brave questions. Some of us may find that the bravest thing we can do is keep a brave silence. Conscience is your right. I invite you to use it.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'd like to have us pause for just a moment and take in what we've heard this morning, to let our breath settle, to take in Sarah's challenge to us to move into action and be brave. Just notice how that's settling in your body. Notice where you feel it moving. Just take a few deep breaths and inhale, and then make your exhale longer than the inhale. Just practice that for a few moments. Maybe inhaling to the count of 3 and exhaling to the count of 6, if that's comfortable for you. As you just keep breathing gently and just noticing, I'm going to read a prayer entitled Only Begun by William G. Sinkford. Spirit of life and love, dear God of all nations, there is so much work to do. We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy. Help us hold fast to our vision of what can be. May we see the hope in our history and find the courage and the voice to work for that constant rebirth of freedom and justice. That is our dream.
Thanks, Dee. Please join me for our closing hymn, number 110, Come Children of Tomorrow.
is calling us to humanhood.
So, as we go back into our lives this week, I invite you to seek out opportunities to do the brave things that only you can do. Serena will now extinguish our chalice.
It's time to extinguish our chalices. Do so with candle or virtual sign. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Amen, and blessed be. After the postlude, we invite you to stay for fellowship time, where we will place you in small groups in breakout rooms. Michael, go ahead and put up the postlude.